Hello and welcome to another sew along video where today we're going to be making the Hudson Pant by True Bias. The Hudson Pant is a modern take on the classic sweat pant or jogger. It's the perfect pant for beginner sewists, especially if this is your first time sewing with knit fabrics. I can confidently say this because the Hudson Pant pattern was actually the first knit sewing pattern that I ever tried for myself, and I have since made many versions. You can sew these pants using a regular sewing machine and a zigzag stitch, or finish your seams with a serger. In this tutorial, I'll be using a serger. This pattern calls for a medium weight knit, such as French terry or sweatshirting that has 25% stretch. This pink bamboo and cotton French terry blend is actually 40% stretch, so it'll have more of a drapey lounge aesthetic. I also made another pair of Hudson pants in brown that uses the recommended stretch, so you can actually see the difference in fit in the same pair of pants using the pink stretchier fabric and the brown 25% stretch fabric. Feel free to experiment with different types of stretch in the fabrics that you choose. Once you've washed and pressed your fabric, lay it out to cut the pieces. I typically cut out my pattern pieces first onto tracing paper, and then I use that as my guide to cut directly onto the fabric. Doing it this way means that I can easily make adjustments if things don't fit properly later on. Make sure to transfer any notch markings from the pattern pieces directly onto the fabric. These notches are used to make sure that we align our pattern pieces properly when we're sewing. It's very important to be precise at this stage in the process. You should have 7 distinct pattern pieces. 2 front pieces mirrored, 2 back pieces mirrored, 2 main pocket pieces mirrored, 2 pocket lining pieces mirrored, 2 pocket detail pieces, 1 waistband cut on the fold, and finally 2 cuffs. Now that we've cut everything out, we're ready to start sewing. Remember that all seam allowances in this pattern are 3/8 of an inch. We're going to start with our pocket detail pieces, fold them lengthwise, wrong sides together, and press them in place. Next, lay out the pocket lining pieces with the right side facing up and note where the notches are. Line up the raw edges of the pocket detail we just pressed with the unnotched curve of the pocket lining. Pin this in place, and you'll have to stretch the pocket detail slightly to make this fit. Baste the pocket detail to the lining using a 3/8 seam allowance. Basting is just sewing using a longer stitch length to temporarily hold pieces of clothing together. Set your stitch length to the longest on your sewing machine, or 5 millimeters, and don't backstitch. This is what your basted pieces should look like at this point. Make sure your front pant piece is right side facing up. Now we're going to match the right side of our pocket piece to the right side of our pant leg, matching the notches and making sure that the pocket detail is sandwiched in the middle. Here I'm just making sure that our notches are actually aligned before we go to the next step, which is to sew these layers together. Pin the pieces in place and then sew them at 3/8 of an inch. I'm using my serger here. Lay everything flat, right sides facing up, grab the pocket detail and flip the pocket lining towards the back. Now we can press the pocket detail in place. Both front pant legs should look like this at this point. Okay, the next step is to attach the main pocket to our pant, or to the front part of our pant, and it can actually be a little bit confusing to do this, so I think it's really important before we do any pinning and stitching to fully visualize and understand how our pocket is going to work, and that way we can be confident that we're going to be sewing it correctly. So I've actually made another pair of Hudson pants where the pocket detail is a little bit more contrasting to the fabric so that it's easier to see, and I'm just going to show on the pants that I'm wearing how this detail looks like. So this is what we're going for. This is our pocket detail, and this sort of area that has right angles is our main pocket piece. And so essentially what we're doing is we're going to be lining up the notches on the top part and on the side so that we have this area where we can just put our hand right through. Here we have the front part of our pant. This is the right pant leg. We've got our pocket detailing right here. If we flip this over, this is our pocket lining. The right side is facing out. Here we've got our main pocket piece. Now it's really important to pay attention to the notches here. So we have the right side of our pocket piece facing up so we can see the right side, and we've got a notch here and we've got a notch here. It's very important to make sure that the long edge of your main pocket piece is facing the side and the round part is facing towards our pant leg. And so what we end up having is a nice right angle at the top corner here. So now what we're going to do is we are going to just place our front pant piece on top of our pocket, and we're just going to make sure that we're aligning the notches. This is what we want our front pant leg to look like when it's all said and done. We're matching notches at the top, we're matching notches at the side, and here we've got a little pocket to put our hands in. That's a good way to check before you actually commit to sewing to make sure that you've done it right. So this is what our pant leg looks like, just laid out flat, not stitched together. The first thing that we're going to do is just stitch the main pocket to the lining. So we are going to get this pant leg out of the way because we don't want to be involved with it just yet. And now that we've done that, what we've got here is our pocket lining and our main pocket underneath. They're matched with right sides together. The way we know that we've got this correct is because the curve of the pocket lining actually matches with the curve of the main pocket. And here I've just stitched all along the curved edges of the pocket. So here you can see that I have pinned this top part through all the layers and pinned the side through all the layers. And now what we're going to do is baste all along this side to secure everything in place, and baste all along the top to secure everything in place. Both our front pant legs should look like this now. With right sides together, match the front of the pant leg to the back at the inner seam. The white box is indicating where we're going to be pinning and ultimately sewing together. Take your time when pinning the two pieces together to ensure appropriate alignment. Here I'm just sewing the inner leg seam with a 3/8 seam allowance. Don't forget to press the seam. With right sides together, align the side seams, pin in place, and stitch at 3/8 of an inch. Don't forget to press the seam. And here are two pant legs now. Okay, now for the cool part. We're going to take the right pant leg, like so. We know it's the right pant leg because if we take our right hand and we pretend we're wearing this, we can put our hand right in. So we've got the right pant leg. We're going to turn that inside out. Right pant leg is now inside out. So then what we're going to do is take the left pant leg and just put it inside of the right pant leg. So I'm just gonna stuff it in there. So what I have here is our pant leg inside the other pant leg. I've aligned all of the seams and the notches, and this is sort of what it would look like. This giant scoop here is our crotch area, and that's what we're going to be sewing next. I'm just showing you how I've pinned the two crotch pieces together, and we're going to sew that. Now that we've given everything a really good press, we're going to check to see how well the stitching in the crotch area actually went. So here we have where all of the seams intersect right at the crotch, and you can see that it's not perfect. This is the result of either I didn't pin my seams correctly, or as I was sewing it, the fabric kind of shifted. In the grand scheme of things, I think this is good enough though, but that's sort of what you're looking for. If you wanted perfection, everything would align and intersect. Moving on to the waistband, we want to take a piece of scrap interfacing and iron it onto the wrong side of our waistband right where the buttonholes are. Fusible interfacing is a woven or non-woven fabric used to stiffen areas of a garment. It's applied to the wrong side of the fabric through heat. Generally, the type of interfacing you use is important, but here we're only using it to reinforce the buttonholes, so you can use any kind of interfacing you'd like. Once you've ironed on your interfacing, we can go to the buttonholes. Every machine is different, so follow your machine instructions on how to do buttonholes. It's always a good idea to test out your buttonholes on a scrap piece of fabric before committing to your actual garment. To make sure we don't accidentally cut through the extra fabric on our waistband, I like to put 2 pins in the top and the bottom of my buttonhole and then use a seam ripper to rip in between. Fold the waistband over right sides together to align the raw edges and sew at 3/8. Press the seam open. Fold the waistband in half lengthwise with the wrong sides touching and pin in place. Press the folded edge down. Now we're going to align the raw edges of the waistband to the raw edge of the pant leg, right sides facing. Make sure that the buttonholes face down and then align the center back, center front, and side seams. Sew this together at 3/8. However, make sure you leave a gap at the end about 4 inches wide. This hole will help us feed the elastic for our waistband through. Okay, we are now at the point where we can put our attention to the waistband. The Hudson Pants features an elastic waistband, so what I've got here is a 2-inch wide piece of elastic, and this is what is essentially going to be holding up our pants. So, what you're going to do is take your elastic and tie it around your waist. Whatever feels comfortable for you is what you want to go with. The Hudson Pants sit slightly above the hips, so that's where we're measuring here. And I want it to be snug enough so that it holds my pants up, but also loose enough that we have enough ease if I'm moving around or, I eat a large turkey dinner. So once we find the size that we like, we're going to add a 1/2 inch to that and then snip our elastic so that we have the amount that we want. I just want to note that I actually added 1 inch to the size of my elastic band just so that I had a little bit more room to work with when I go to sew it shut at the end. I've added a safety pin to the end of this band because what we're going to do next is feed it through our waistband on our pants, and I find that having this safety tip helps me kind of find the band in the garment and pull it through. So here we can see I've started to put the band through. This is the tip of the safety pin on my thumb here, and I'm just going to keep feeding through this waistband and pulling it on this side until we go all the way around the waistband. So here I've got the elastic about halfway through the waistband, and I just want to show the technique that I'm using to do this. So the tip of my safety pin is right in here, and what I'm doing is essentially feeding the fabric towards the safety pin like that so that it kind of bunches up. I'm holding onto the safety pin through the fabric, and then I am pulling that waistband through. And as I keep doing that over time, it just goes further and further around the waistband. So we're going to bunch up the fabric here, hold on to the safety pin, and pull. So what we're going to do is stitch this waistband together. The instructions say to use a 1/2 inch, but that's only if you put in a 1/2 inch extra on your elastic when you first measured it. So I put in an extra 1 inch of overlap on my elastic. So when I sew these together, I'll be using a 1 inch allowance, and to give it some extra sturdiness or rigidity, we're also going to sew in an X shape and a box within that 1 inch or 1/2 inch to make sure that our elastic does not come apart when we wear it. This is what your elastic should look like once it's sewn together. All right, our pants now have a waistband. They look great. So the next thing that we're gonna do is just close up that hole that we had to actually put our waistband in there. So we're gonna stitch that up and then move on to the next step. Once you've closed up the hole in the waistband, you'll notice that there is some natural gathering that happens across the waistband. We're going to put pins in there periodically to just hold those gathers in place. We're going to be doing 2 rows of stitching, one above the buttonholes and one below the buttonholes, that will create a channel so that our drawstring can go through that channel and out of our actual buttonholes. In order to execute this properly, use a straight stitch on your sewing machine and then grab either end of the waistband and pull it straight so that there are no gathers. And then at every pin point where we stop, take the pin out, and then continue. The resulting effect is a very cool gathered bunching look that really elevates the look of this pant. Next, we can feed our drawstring cord through the buttonholes and through the channel that we've created, coming out on the other side. Fold the cuff pieces in half widthwise with the right sides touching. Sew this together at 3/8. Fold the tube that you've just created so that the wrong sides are touching and the raw edges are aligned. Make sure to line up the seams as well. You should end up with a cuff that has a nice folded edge at the bottom and raw edges aligned. Pin the raw edges together so they stay in place and then press the bottom folded edge. Now we're going to attach the cuff to our pant leg. First, we want to find the seam on the inner pant leg and align that with the seam of our cuff. We're going to align the raw edges of the cuff and the bottom of the pant together and pin everything in place. The cuff is slightly smaller than the opening of the pant leg, so you might have to stretch it a little bit to make it fit. This then gets sewn at 3/8 of an inch. If this is your first time putting a cuff on a pant leg, I would suggest that you baste it first on your sewing machine before committing to actually sewing it together. This way you can then check your work to make sure that nothing has slid out of place. But if you're confident with your pinning and your sewing technique, by all means go for it. This is the finished cuff, and then when we flip it over, you can see that I've neatly aligned the inner seam of the pant leg with the seam of the cuff. The last thing you need to do is give everything a really good press, and then you're free to put on your pants and enjoy. Thank you for watching my video. If you found this helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to my channel for more content.